What's up, guys? This is Andre, and I'm here today with Chase, and welcome to the 9th episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Junction podcast. And today we will be talking about when Jiu-Jitsu white belts should be learning wrestling skills. And this is something that wasn't so important before, and it's become increasingly important over time as wrestling and Jiu-Jitsu have blended to become, wrestle-jitsu. That's like what all the big people are doing now. Mm-hmm. Like, all you have to do is look at high-level competitions and realize that it's dominated by people who, if they don't have a deep wrestling background, at the very least have trained it afterwards.
Yeah, but you have to.
Yeah,
there's layers of wrestling techniques that maybe you don't have to, learn a lot of wrestling skills, but probably from day one you should learn a wrestling stance.
Understanding posture.
Wrestling stance, posture, and head position. Hands and everything else probably come, but that should probably be learned first, and then you'll have another set of skills. But it's probably learning a couple different skill sets.
Yeah,
it's probably the best way to kind of break it down. But I definitely think from day one you should learn a stance, a proper stance, not a BJJ stance. Because those are funny grappling stances, but learn a real wrestling stance.
Yeah.
That's king on the feet. So.
Yeah. And in a lot of schools, you're not really going to be starting on the feet, and that's okay. You can still use those same principles from when you're in a guard passing position.
Yeah, I mean that's why wrestling is one of the best skills to kind of fill in spots in BJJ. You hand fight from your knees the same way. You head position. The same way, the same wrestling principles, and passing a guard is from a wrestling stance.
Yeah, and this, like you said, from the knees. We're not talking. It will work in knee wrestling, but for the love of God, pull guard or end it.
That was
quickly.
where somebody accepted guard and standing. So we start on my knee and they're on their butt. No knee wrestling.
Yeah,
wrestling is only from your feet.
Yeah, wrestling from your feet. Yeah. So,
Good.
There's all kinds of really cool lessons and principles you can take from wrestling that really up-level guard passing and pressure. And like you already mentioned, the head positioning thing. I also feel like the way that wrestlers hand fight is, they're just
because it's they're taught. Wrestlers are taught kind of from the beginning to. No matter what you're doing technique-wise, you're always jockeying for hand position and head position.
Yeah.
And then even a slight angle.
Yeah.
And if you add those three things into a guard pass.
Oh, it's much better. Better.
You're set up and you're ready to pass. You're probably just pinning and passing there.
Yeah, it's like you have a third arm.
Yeah, no, But that's learned from day one, where your head goes and where your hands go. This is always happening. Mm-hmm. And I think something wrestling teaches too is the position, how to hold position, so even that, like not flopping. No, you got to stay in a stance, stay in a position, keep your head here.
Yeah, they stay engaged and they're ready to move.
Yep.
So these are all kind of things that wrestlers already know. And if you're somebody who has no wrestling background, and you need to kind of keep up with that kind of thing, then you just pick some of those principles up. Like when I started paying attention to head positioning, that changed everything for me.
Everything.
Yeah. And then after I figured out how to use head position, I started paying more attention to hand fighting. And then when I started being able to hand fight people who were, had real wrestling backgrounds, then I started thinking about how do I make these level changes the way that they're doing it. And obviously I'm not like I don't have the hundreds or thousands of mat hours that wrestlers do. But if you stay very simple and principled in the things that you're pursuing, you can do it in just a few dozen.
That's what my, and obviously I'm going to talk about kids for a second, but that's what my kids program is based around. I can tell you, I have kids that train full-time MMA, full-time jiu-jitsu, 2 days a week of judo, and full-time wrestling. 3 to 4 days a week, and they can wrestle on a national level, and they don't know nearly as many techniques as these guys who wrestle 5-7 days a week, 5 to 7 days a week. Some kids, Pennsylvania, these kids wrestle literally every day.
Yeah.
6 hours a day in the summer, they have 3 days, 2-hour practices 3 times a day. That's all these kids have ever done. So they don't have as big of a book, so to speak, but they're able to wrestle even on a national level, with some of the best wrestlers in the country off of this handful of kind of the principles of wrestling, the fundamental movements and positioning that I'm willing to even say that, you can learn them on air for the most part. You can learn the principles and the movements, most of the principles and movements on air. That'll definitely be a video one day.
Yeah.
That's kind of it, because the kids have done it, and I've watched it kind of progress, through the kids. So, you can learn those movements, not necessarily focusing on wrestling as a whole, but the wrestling movements would definitely. We've already got a video on
something. Yeah.
I think so. We talked about front headlock positions.
Yeah, I'll link to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like focusing on some of the core principles and like taking little pieces and then integrating that into your jiu-jitsu game it can be very efficient, right? So we talked about, like, I have here where wrestling shows up. It shows up a lot in guard passes and top pressure. Obviously, it shows up on the feet if you're starting from the feet. Like that's what everyone will think about. Like, oh, I need to integrate wrestling into jiu-jitsu, and they think about being on the feet. And for sure, that's the primary thing that people will see. But the primary things that people will use in like an everyday kind of sense, if they're mostly a jiu-jitsu athlete, is probably guard passing and top pressure.
Oof, I think the ability to take a back. Wrestlers have an uncanny ability to control the back.
It's their ability to change angles and find the back is pretty good too.
Yeah, you're going to find kind of a wrestling skill that's going to translate to jiu-jitsu. Really, it's just the ability to control the back, because American wrestling folk style is parterre, top bottom, and that's why in MMA, we have our guys tend to control better than freestyle wrestlers. Freestyle wrestlers aren't about a lot of control. Folk style wrestling is a top bottom parterre. Our college wrestling is based around, you get a point if you stay on top of the other guy for 1 minute and it's called a riding clock.
Yeah.
So if I ride you for 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then you have to ride me for at least 31 seconds, so I don't get a point. But so it's about just controlling the back. So, somebody like a Tom Lane, definitely nowhere near as much jiu-jitsu as some of the guys I've seen him grab. But, just the wrestling skill of being able to kind of control a back the way a wrestler does with forward pressure, chest pressure, and those are, again, movements and fundamental principles that you can get better at just by keeping your chest where it's supposed to be, your hips where they're supposed to be, and your hands. That's actually something that for jiu-jitsu, there's no rule about locking your hands.
Yeah.
So
in wrestling, you're not able to.
Yeah, you're not able to lock your hands on top. So you can actually layer on another layer of control with locking your hands around somebody in jiu-jitsu. So, maybe that's an overlooked for sure.
Yeah.
That might even be if anybody talks about wrestling and jiu-jitsu, that might be the last place is their ability to control the back, but that's what they can do. And I think last is the ability to hold someone on their back. And everybody's like, well, wrestlers should be good at pinning. Yeah, but unless you're a fantastic wrestler, you probably didn't pin everybody.
Yeah.
But you probably had to ride them out. Like pinning's probably the least practiced skill, but a wrestler does have the ability to pressure and hold you on your back like no other.
Yeah. And like, I feel like just learning jiu-jitsu without any wrestling principles, some of those things will be at least partially developed, right?
Yeah.
Like the pinning and whatever. And that'll...
You're just going to hit a hard road. When you hit the hard road, you got to... There's some holes. I think it's even talked on here. The wrestle jitsu. Like there's some holes that wrestling just kind of fills in.
Yeah. And to me, the holes that wrestling fills in are not necessarily the things that There's not a 100% overlap with the things that it helps. Wrestling will help you in tons of ways, but the holes that they fill, super, super important.
I laugh. One of my favorite things in the class is I've got a wrestler who's done front headlocks his whole life. We're in a jiu-jitsu class, and we're showing from a jiu-jitsu turtle position, and you're on the head attacking the guillotine. And the wrestler's on like both knees, looking all confused, trying to do this arm and guillotine. And it's like, hey, you know how to wrestle. Like, get in a wrestling front headlock. And then they're able to do the move. But there's places like that where wrestling is everywhere in jiu-jitsu. And, wrestling is, in my eyes, king in a lot of those places in grappling.
Right.
Because it's based around control and holding an opponent, and usually a strong opponent. So,
yeah. All right. So let's bring it back to relating it to white belts and beginners for jiu-jitsu, right? So as a white belt, you have like all of these, well, not all of these, you have a few things that you're able to do, right? First year, like you have probably know the basics of an arm bar, the basics of
triangle, Kimura.
Yeah, Kimura, all of that, right?
Americana.
And all of those things they're far away from each other. And where I think that wrestling does the most good in plugging holes is fixing all of those neutral positions and creating an ability to scramble to the right things.
I like that. Yeah, and that's it's funny. That's a hip up, getting height with your hips and things like that. That wrestling kind of positions, and they're trying to get back to a strong position.
Yeah, wrestling fundamentals it gives you the ability to navigate neutral.
Yeah, you build strong bases. You have good posts. You don't.
Yeah, navigating neutral. If you've not already done wrestling, if you haven't already done even judo does the same kind of thing, but for jiu-jitsu, wrestling is like the king of connecting the pieces.
Yeah,
and it'll help with a lot of like random things like riding the back. It'll help you with like being able to guard pass and all of that. But what really the wrestling fundamentals really helps you navigate neutral and get to where you want to be.
It makes you feel safer in neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know when you're not used to being on your feet, it's definitely weird to push and pull somebody. Mm-hmm. It's weird to be pushed and pulled.
Yeah.
Learning the awareness of that, which being a hobbyist, right? We're talking about hobbyist, beginner, white belts, like, you want to have a good, strong base, like, and you want this stuff to translate to if you have to. I mean, not that you would have to, but you want it to be self-defense related too.
Yeah.
And
just being capable.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. We talk about security, right? Just being secure in the situation. So, the wrestling position it's going to teach you to get in a good stance, a good, strong stance, and how to be pushed on and pulled on some while you're standing, in the best form. Some of the other arts do that, but, wrestlers just kind of have an understanding of how to really apply push and pull powers and move your feet, and definitely for balance purposes, right? Learning that position, that wrestling position is big there.
Yeah, it's like they spend so much time on like core capabilities of the simple things. Yeah. It's just so powerful when you get some of those principles in action.
Hips under, head up. You'll learn how powerful that is.
For sure.
And that's something easy, right? As a beginner, as a day one, you could be like, oh, wait a minute, man, just hips in, head up when I'm doing things. Oh wow, and you'll see the power in that. You don't have no jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
you go in the first day.
Yeah, I mean, like even weightlifters do that. So it's just
and like that's the general idea
super,
of wrestling
you
positions.
Just being able to apply those fundamental, important aspects of grappling, right? So wrestling corrects the weakness that most people have in neutral. It connects all of your jiu-jitsu together because you get to navigate the neutral space. So how do we start setting up our ability to learn and practice these core principles. As a jiu-jitsu athlete, that's a beginner.
Is it okay to tell you movements? Do I sound like crazy? That's the only way.
I mean, people can call you crazy if they want to. Yeah. Go ahead, comment
please.
below if you think Chase is crazy.
But that's where I would. Anytime someone pays me money to teach them how to wrestle, because and maybe I can cut curves, right? And I do, but I got to make sure that you can. Again, if you can't walk straight on air, how can you walk straight with somebody pushing and pulling you? Right. You know, so every adult that I start on, lesson packages, that's one of the things I do is movement based. I got to make sure you can do some movements and make sure if I want to see that first, so I think movements is your first place, and then maybe personals, but movements, learn. There are, an endless book of wrestling movements. And they're all going to teach, maybe you don't find, in the endless book of wrestling, maybe you don't find something that explains those core fundamental principles, but all of the wrestling movements are going to train you to fix your body position. And you don't even have to know it, but there's a million of them on YouTube that you can find. But wrestling movements will be your first place because you can start that without help, without a partner, bare base, not even, even a spot in your living room floor. You can right here in the podcast room floor.
You need what? Maybe 4 feet?
Yeah, 6 feet. To do movements, and you can really start. Okay, wait. This movement is just to get my hips under my head. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're serious about that, that's your first place. And then if you have some other, there's a little more icing on the cake, right? Maybe you have a partner in the room who's wrestled before. That'd be my next check.
Yeah.
Go to a partner who, oh man, you wrestled in high school? Yeah, well, actually, I wrestled on the club team in college too.
Yeah, that's an incredible resource.
Yeah, he wrestled on the club, and that's not, he wasn't a collegiate wrestler. He wrestled on the club team. That's where, anybody could sign up for the club, but that's just somebody who's done some wrestling. Oh, well, listen, I'm looking into. I want to learn kind of how to hand fight. Like, you don't have to teach me a double leg. You don't have to teach me, any moves. Like, you just push and pull on me a little bit. Let me, fight for inside position and head position. That's where I would start. That's the next place I start.
That was actually the first thing I did. I was like, I don't see myself hitting a knee right now. Let's hand fight. And I did 45 minutes of hand fighting.
Yeah, but that's kind of it though, right? That's so I structure things for value in my head, and if someone's paying me for lessons, then the next place we start is we're probably going to hand fight for 45 minutes a day until you're able to push, pull, move, and breathe. Mm-hmm. And that might take 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Most of the time, only about half the clients I have are steadfast enough to stick with it.
Stick with it past the boring things.
But when they stick past the boring things, they're able to really, really learn.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's definitely somebody in your class. I guess what would be next if you don't have somebody, a training partner who's wrestled. Maybe your instructor can point you in wrestling lessons. That would be your next option.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get someone to teach you wrestling, that's going to be faster.
Yeah,
for sure.
And you're paying. You can direct those. You can specifically ask, hey, I really, just hand. And I promise, not a single wrestling instructor, anybody giving you a lesson is going to complain about putting you through wrestling movements.
Yeah. And
teaching you how to move in a stance.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all. They're gonna be like, what you want to. You mean I don't have to do a bunch of moves with you?
Yeah, you mean I'm not gonna let you double leg me in a way I don't like.
You don't want to wrestle live and you've never wrestled before? Awesome.
Yeah.
So and then most of the time the instructor is really going to enjoy the fact that you're like, hey, I want to focus on fundamentals. And by fundamentals I mean I want to start on my feet. I want to start working on head position and kind of push. Again, I keep saying pushing and pulling. I feel like a broken record, but. That's all I do
that's a lot of it though.
Yeah, that's all I do with kids. I go through periods where they come in for practice and
line drills of pushing and pulling.
Your son is definitely for 30, 45 minutes, a bunch of times has hand fought without stopping.
Yeah.
30 minutes at a time. And all they're doing, they're tired, they're dripping sweat, but they're just pushing and pulling each other. They're not even practicing yet. They're just pushing and pulling and trying to make each other fall. And, we ramp up the intensity. Like, okay, now we're not just trying to push and pull, but you're trying to make your partner fall. Because that's the idea of wrestling. If you can break their base, then everything else is going to come. So that's
for sure.
And every instructor you find will be obliged to do that for you.
And that's all from the feet stuff, and that's super important if you're going to compete. If you're just training normally, you can still use the same principle: push, pull, guard, pass.
For sure.
Push, pull, duck under, and take the back. Push, pull. That's what my kid does all the time. Push, pull, take back, duck under. Right.
Yeah, it's super simple, right?
Keep it simple. I learned a lot about how to take people's backs from watching my kid.
I'm telling you, and better believe it. Like that's the basic idea of wrestling. You pull the head down. If their head comes down, you grab it.
Yeah.
If their head comes up, you grab their legs.
You duck under.
You go under their arm, or you grab their legs. Like if their head comes up, you go under, or you grab their legs. Like. Yeah. That's the way I layer it for kids. That's the way I layer it for the beginners.
Yeah, think about it simply. It's not complicated to integrate simple stuff. No, you don't need complicated. Like these are all just a bunch of other jiu-jitsu people. You don't need complicated. In fact, like at the highest level, you have just the principles, and you're going to be able to give people a hard time in those neutral spots.
Well, that's why I gave the little tidbit at the beginning. I'm telling you, I had a kid this weekend who these other kids are full-time wrestlers, and my kid, that's just a portion. That is 1/4 of his training.
Yeah.
And he's able to compete with kids who have already been All-Americans, who's a middle school national champion. And we're staying so fundamental that we're making kids follow with movement-based stuff. Again, at the highest level, not even being able to hit techniques, because those kids aren't even movement based, as much as they should be. So it's definitely can be you cut the coin, and obviously you're not trying to compete with the best in the world. That's what's cool with it. You're just having to deal with probably a majority class of white belts, and then a handful of upper belts, and a little bit of jiu-jitsu or a little bit of wrestling principle.
It goes a long way in a jiu-jitsu.
There used to be stories of the wrestlers would walk in the room, and the instructor would be the first one to grab the wrestler. Yeah. Because it's like, man, he's going to kind of just his pressure, his push and a pull, his head position.
It's going to be hard.
He wins against most white belts, guys that have done jiu-jitsu for a year, 2 years. A wrestler can walk in the room. The wrestler we talked about earlier, and Tom Lane, one of our pro fighters, he's an All-American. The reason why he chose our school is we're the first school he went to that challenged him.
Yeah,
he grabbed a hold of black belts across the country, and because of his level of wrestling, and he's not a technical guy.
No, he's not. But he mauls people. He mauls people.
Head position.
Yeah.
Hips, pressure.
Yep.
Locks his hands. You can't get away from him. Basic wrestling principles. That's not wrestling techniques.
Wrestling.
I wouldn't have him teach a technique seminar, but he would show people how to hold on to somebody, right? Yeah. I listen. I grab. I was like, hey Tom, will you show him how to do that? Tom's like, do what? I'm like, what you do from the back there? Like, it's not even any, but like, hey, will you show that to him and let him feel what you're doing?
Yeah.
But that's all wrestling kind of movements. And so just that little bit is going to excel you. You'll probably be asked, your instructor will come, hey, what did you change? Just off a push pull, adding some of those basic principles in.
Yeah. So obviously we would love to be able to afford and or find specific wrestling help. Right. How would we go about it if we're just at like a normal jiu-jitsu school? We don't have resources to either the resources don't exist in the school, which is kind of common, honestly. It's
because wrestling threatens jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me. You might be at a place where there's wrestling's kind of like
don't do that. That's not what we're doing here. Yeah. It kind of is, but that's a different topic entirely, right? So we don't have those resources. What do we do to build some of these core things in an environment where we don't have access to that? Like you talked about movements, and we're definitely going to put out something about those core movements. So when that comes out, I'll link to it here.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
and I can even shoot you a quick list to post in the comments under if you want. And it's general terms,
general terms. You could YouTube it first. You could look it up somewhere else. And when we've created that resource, we'll link to it.
Oh, we've talked about this before. I think, obviously if you don't have that resource within your gym, there are usually, I know that we're talking obvious. We're talking about, you're working, you're fitting jiu-jitsu into your time, but there's usually a wrestling club, within an hour drive of where you live that, that you can volunteer at. No question. And if not volunteer, they'll let you pay they're usually nonprofit, $25 a month. And they'll let you come in and take part in their basic wrestling class. It's not just kids wrestling. There's people that wrestle all across the board. So you can usually find a wrestling club, that's a school team usually. But you can reach out and, hey, I started jiu-jitsu. It's kind of the same conversation we had then, right? Hey, I started jiu-jitsu at a local school. They don't really have wrestling, and I think wrestling is something I need for BJJ. Like, do you guys have a spot for me to come and maybe help or watch? And most coaches will oblige you. They're like, man, come out. You're trying to learn wrestling from its base. Yeah. And I think you're a super good example of how much did you learn in our basic kids wrestling class?
I just watched the kids. I didn't even really do it, and it showed up in my real grappling.
Just Prince. And what are you doing in the kids class? You're just listening and watching movements, and hearing the ideas and why. Because I just repeat those ideas over and over. Hey, this is why we do this movement. This is why we do this movement. I think that's a super valuable, and that's something. That's a gem. That's your little ruby that you found. Like when you crack the rock. Wait a minute, I got a wrestling, and you might look up. 45 minutes from here, we have a national circuit. We have a national circuit wrestling club that you might look up. You might pull up Dark Horse Wrestling, who takes kids literally all across the country on dual teams as a team, and you might be able to get in with a place that has world class training. There's usually a lot of your towns have a wrestling club, and that would be, I think, if your gym doesn't have those sources on top of your movements, that's your next checkpoint. Yeah. Or maybe even the high school coach lessons. Maybe you're looking at a coach for lessons. That's who I would call this. Somebody who is.
Yeah. Go down the list of things of different convenience levels. You won't need somebody to be an extremely proficient wrestler to be able to teach you the things that you want. For sure. And okay, let's just imagine that I don't want to do any of that. It's too far away. What do we focus on? We're gonna post a list, but I think that being deliberate with your head positioning and your hip positioning in a wrestling kind of way from neutral is probably where you get the most bang for your buck. If you're just like, well, the only thing I feel like doing is listening to these two jokers.
Okay, well, here it is. All right. People pay me for this. Keep your nose where their nose is. Keep your belt buckle facing their belt buckle. Mm-hmm. Keep your feet wide. Don't have your feet on the same line. Boom.
Can you explain what that last one means?
Yep. Square. I don't want to be square. I don't want my feet parallel. I need one foot staggered in front of the other so that I have a lead leg and a back leg.
Yeah. So that looks like a combat stance. Yep. If you're
passing a guard, you'll have a lead leg and a rear leg. Yep. And I don't want them on the same line this way, the same line this way. So they are staggered and wide. My nose is where their nose is, and my belt buckle is facing their belt buckle.
Yeah. Simple.
That was 4.
Yeah.
Maybe the 5th one would be hand in front of my leg, and it's over.
Yeah.
Lead leg, your hand in front of your lead leg, and then that's all you need.
That's almost like the keep your elbow close to your ribs or knees concept that happens in jiu-jitsu. It's the same thing.
Yeah. I wish I could get down in the stance right now and show you, but I do it all the time. You see me do it for sure. I lay on my back and I say, okay, here's your on your back position. Your knees are close to your chest. You turn to your side. Okay. Then I roll to my base, and then I stand up, and it's the only thing that changes my wrestling stance is this, and my hands go down.
Yeah.
My elbow positioning doesn't change. My head positioning doesn't change. My knee positioning doesn't change. My feet positioning. It's all in the same line, where if I'm just on a different plane rolling through that same position. So that's that wrestling position. The nose where their nose is, belt buckle where their belt buckle is, staggered stance, wide stance, hands down.
Yeah. And when things are in a scramble, make height.
Make height. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's probably a hand. Yeah, make height in a scramble. Make height with head, or make height with hips. That's two, and that's probably a little. But those are two. Two places.
I'd say make height with anything is gonna help you in a scramble.
Yep.
Like you just want to be above them. If you're above them, you get to end up on top much more easily than they end up on top because they have to move you in order to become on top.
Keep your hips under you. Keep your head up.
Yeah.
Elbows in.
Yeah. So just those concepts, like do any of those, and it's gonna start setting you apart from the other people who are pure jits.
Yeah, hands down.
Cool. I think we've covered
because I love doing this, but the last little piece.
Talk to your training partner.
Yeah, no. I would just tagging. Go ahead and train a good habit. I say nose to nose as your bait. But really, I'd like it nose to chin. I'd like you to be, and that's another wrestling principle. I want you to engage a hair lower.
It's kind of like inside position on the torso.
Yeah, I just want to get inside a position before I engage. So sometimes if I come and engage you nose to nose, if I come in under you, I know that I'm in a better position than you. So it's like engaging you in a better position or making sure my position is better than yours before I engage, whatnot. But, I'd like to, those five I probably need to write those five down and have them posted somewhere. Those five are pretty good.
Yeah. And we'll that's another resource that we should probably make.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So that'll also be linked. I'm going to have to make a list of all these links.
It's a very,
we have a to-do list now.
Yeah. We didn't talk about nothing. We just gave you a bunch of links to click on.
Anyway, so just as a beginner, do all of the jiu-jitsu that you're being taught. Try to integrate even just some integration of any of these principles will start up leveling you. And you're going to find if you focus on any one of these things, the other ones will become easier to add. You will find more places to use these principles if you have them in mind.
Yeah,
so
I think if you're using those principles, you have more confidence. Those principles, something I don't want to overlook is sometimes when your sweeps, instead of being swept, they end up on your feet.
Yeah.
Because you have confidence in your feet. Instead of just being like, oh, okay, they're sweeping me, and you just give the sweep up and roll to your back.
Yeah.
No, you can realize you're being swept and get back to your feet because you have some confidence in getting to your feet. So that's a place that fills in big.
Yeah, like when you're getting swept, you bring your legs wide, like you said. That was one of those things. You bring your legs wide, you catch yourself with a foot, and then you get to stay on top. And
felled sweeps. If I'm sweeping you, felled sweep. And it's like, instead of me just settling for my back, no, I created space.
Let me grab a leg.
Let me get back to my feet. Make height. Yeah.
Grab a leg, make height, take the back.
That's those places it kind of fills in.
That's where the differences are made. As all of those like not totally neutral, but kind of neutral spots. It's just the scrambling. Your scrambling just improves so much if you have these principles in mind and you integrate it into your grappling holistically.
For sure.
So anyway, cool. I think that we covered everything we want to for this wrestling skills in jiu-jitsu focused thing. Just focus on the principles, and I swear it's going to pay off. Even the simple ones. So anyway, thank you for listening. This is the end of the 9th episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Junction podcast, and we will see you next time.